So Jorge, if you'd like to introduce the next section, I think we're ready.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Very briefly, I saw some comments and Doug was mentioning the limit file bandwidth delay product. Regarding bandwidth delay product, the next hands-on session, number 2, actually after the one, we will cover that. And all those topics are covered by the perfSONAR lab library, which everyone has access to. For example, the limits file is lab number 10. So these labs will be available for 3 months, but we can always extend if somebody requests. Now, the next item in the agenda is the first hands-on session. We'll be covering the perfSONAR toolkit, the graphical user interface, and how to run this pScheduler. You should have received an email, and if you didn't register yet to the platform, so there is a link here, which is enroll. You click there and just fill the information, and you will have access to the lab library. The presenter will be Jose. Jose is a PhD student here at the University of South Carolina College of Engineering and Computing. Jose research focused on TCP congestion control, passive measurements using P4 programmable switches, and buffer sizing. Jose is also one of the developer of the lab libraries that we developed here at the University of South Carolina. So prior to joining the PhD program here, he received his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. Jose, do you want to share your screen?
Sure, thank you, Dr. Jorge, for the presentation. I will share my screen. So I will introduce briefly the lab library, and then we will jump to the hands-on session. Let me swap this. I hope everyone can see my screen. All right, so the perfSONAR labs consist of 10 labs that cover several topics that Doug already explained. For example, the first steps to configure a perfSONAR node. We talk about the tools, how to configure regular tests using the perfSONAR graphical user interface, which I'm gonna show next. Then we show also pScheduler, how you can use pScheduler. We talk about also buffer sizing in one lab, lab 6. We show how to create a psconfig template. Then we talk about MatDash. We also explain a tool called psconfig web administrator, which facilitates creating pScheduler templates. And finally, we also cover how to configure the pScheduler limits, which was discussed before. Just a brief overview about the lab manuals. Each lab starts with a brief description, objectives, lab topology, lab settings, roadmap, and then in section 1, we provide a brief introduction about the topic that is being covered in the lab. In section 2, we start with the step-by-step direction. You might skip section 1 if you are already familiar with the material. To run this lab, we prepare a pod that consists of 6 virtual machines. You can see on the left-hand side, the perfSONAR pod that consists of 3 perfSONAR nodes and 2 routers and 1 client used to manage the nodes. For example, in perfSONAR 1, we have the perfSONAR toolkit and the perfSONAR web administrator. perfSONAR 2 has toolkit plus the central management that supports MatDash, and perfSONAR 3 has only the toolkit. And on the right hand side, you can see that with this pod, we practically cover all the components of perfSONAR using the toolkit and the central management. And we also explain in lab 2 how to use these individual tools. So now we are gonna run the lab, which is lab 3. You are welcome to run this lab with me. We will go step by step, and we are going to configure regular tests using the perfSONAR graphical user interface. A brief description about this activity. We have on the left-hand side the lab topology, and on the right-hand side we have the perfSONAR layer. We are gonna work on the visualization layer using the Toolkit user interface, and we are gonna, and from here we are gonna configure regular tests. We are gonna access a perfSONAR node from the client machine, which is running a Ubuntu Linux, and we are gonna have access to the Toolkit dashboard, which contains all the tools needed to run the regular test. So one more time, we are gonna configure this test, and we are gonna have the results propagated into a dashboard, like we are seeing here on the left-hand side. And also, if you run the test for a long time, you can also have a timing diagram if you click on one of these tests. Just to recap, you are welcome to run this lab with me. If you are not enrolled yet into the platform, I will put the registration link on the chat window, so you can start registering, and you will have access for to the lab for 90 days. If you are already enrolled, you just log in into the portal. I will put the link also, and you can run the lab with me. All right, so I think we are ready to do the lab. I will change my screen. I will access the academic cloud. You will see here, I will click on perfSONAR. This is showing me the list of labs that we prepare for this bot, and I will click on lab number 3, so I can schedule a lab for that activity. So the pod is initializing. This pod is hosted in the academic cloud, and you can run labs on your own pace. There's no restriction on this. You can see the pod has been initialized. We have the lab topology here. You can navigate the virtual machines by clicking on them. For example, if I click on perfSONAR 2, I directly jump into the node. And you can also use the tabs to navigate the environment. Yes, sir.
I will just pause you a second because I see some messages. Is anyone stuck on the flashing NDG screen? I noticed that some of you are stuck on there. Yeah, it might take a little bit of time, probably because we're starting so many virtual machines at once. It should be there. The pod should be deployed soon. So I just think it's slow because of the high demand.
Yes,
suddenly.
That could happen. Everybody is trying to reserve the resources. These are virtual machines, and they have to initialize in order to run the lab. So another thing that I wanna show is that you have in the content tab, you have the lab manual. You can download this manual and see the content. So I already downloaded them. So what I will do is divide my screen. On the left-hand side, I will put the lab manual, and on the right-hand side, I will put the lab environment. So go back to the lab environment, click on the topology, and I will run through the lab. So what do we have here? Each lab has the table of contents. As we explained before, we provide a brief overview about the lab activity, objectives, the lab topology. We also show the credentials, which is admin for for each persona node. We provide a lab roadmap about the topics that we're gonna cover in this lab. In section 1, we have an introduction about, a brief introduction about the activity. And right after that, in section 2, we configure the regular test. And here is where we are gonna run the lab step by step. In this case, we are gonna configure a persona node from the client machine. So what I'm gonna do next is click on the client machine so I can access it. You can see this is a Ubuntu virtual machine. I will open the web browser and type the IP address of a persona node, which is in this case 192.168.2.10, that corresponds to persona 2. If you have a warning here, you just click on advance and accept the risk and continue. So the pScheduler toolkit graphical user interface is loading now. You can see here that we can add information about our organization, and also you can observe the services here. How to add administrative information is covered in lab number 1 of this series. Then we can see the service available in this persona node, which one of them is pScheduler that we are going to cover in the next activity. I will scroll down and show that we also have a tab for the test results, and that's the thing that we are going to configure now in section 2.2. To do so, on step 1, what we do next is click on configure tests. The credentials, you can see here, if required, the username is admin and the password is admin.
Jose, you may want to pause for a second. It looks
Yes,
like
sir.
there are a number of people getting 503 errors and having trouble connecting to the lab.
Since that I was able to log in, let me go back to the lab. I will click on learn. I will select perfSONAR. And I will click on lab number 3.
Yeah, I will answer some question. Is there any VM image available we can run locally? We do have, and we can share. Now this persona requires for this lab library require 6 or 7 virtual machines, let's say, if I remember well. So
Yes,
we can make them available. Absolutely. It's just that there is a need to interconnect virtual machines between each other, creating the virtual networks. There are 3 networks. If you show again the topology, Jose.
Yes.
So 6 virtual machines and 3 networks, and there's a need to set up this environment. That's the complex part if you want to do it yourself, but certainly we can make available these virtual machines.
All right. It seems that people are getting into the lab, and
yeah, there are some daydream. We will try to figure out what the problem is, and you might want to get out and get in again, so you will take another pod, but we will try to figure out what is happening.
yes, what I can do is I can just start from the very beginning. I didn't configure anything on this lab again, so what I'm gonna do, I will close this and restart the lab session. Now I will start over this lab activity so you can follow it with me. And I am in section 2 now, and I will start with step 1, where I open the browser. Before that,
and probably just one last thing, Jose. If you are still having issues, you might want to refresh the browser, try it again, It should be loading now. So
yes.
yeah, it seems that most of the cases are now initializing the pod. Okay, Jose, I will let you continue from here.
All right. So I will start over from section 2. I will click on the client host. I will open the web browser and access a perfSONAR node. You can see here on step number 2, I will type the IP address 192.168.2.10 that corresponds to perfSONAR 2. Again, the perfSONAR Toolkit user interface is loading. And as I explained before, you can see here the basic information about the node. These steps are covered in lab number 1, how to add administrative information. You can add your organization, address, and contact. You can see also the services running here. We can see pScheduler, which is a tool that we're gonna cover in the next activity. And below, there's a tab for the test results that will show the measurement tests that we are gonna run, or that we're gonna configure in this lab. So how we proceed? We explained this on section 2.2, and what we have to do is clicking on configure tests. Authentication prompt will pop out, and the credentials are username is admin and the password is admin. After that, we will be able to continue on step number 3, where we configure the regular test. We click on add test. I will just follow the manual here on step 4. We are going to configure a throughput test. We are going to choose that test. We click on throughput. And you can see that we can add some parameters here. Oh, sorry. We will give him a name. I will call it throughput test. And in the next step, I will select the interface. In this case, we have just one interface. Then what I'm gonna do here is setting the time between the tests, which in this case will be 1 minute. I just wanna emphasize here that this is not a realistic scenario. We are doing this in this lab because we wanna have the results propagated into the test result section, and we don't want to wait too much, so we can see some results already there. So that's the reason why we added we asked to set the time between the tests to 1 minute, which is not a realistic scenario because if you have other tests running, they will definitely overlap, or maybe the test will overlap even within this node. So next step, step number 8, we add the participants of this test. We add the IP address. I will add 192.168.1.10, which corresponds to perfSONAR 1. I will give a description. I will call it perfSONAR 1. Then I will add the host. And next step is adding another participant on this test, which is the host 192.168.3.10. And I will give him a description. I will call it perfSONAR 3. I will click on add host, and then I will save this configuration. We'll scroll down and click on OK. After that, you can see that we already added the throughput test here. So to save this and have the test already running, I will click on save. You can see that the interface is very flexible. You can go back and you can delete the test. You can re-edit the test in order to modify. You can see the summary here that we are running a throughput test. We are using TCP. The time between tests is 1 minute, and the test members, we added 2 hosts. So just to recap what we did in this section before seeing the results, I will go back to the topology and explain what we just did. From the client machine, we access the perfSONAR2 node. In this node, we configure a throughput test between perfSONAR2 and perfSONAR1, and another test between perfSONAR2 and perfSONAR3. So that's what we specified in this section, and I will go back to the client machine by clicking on it. And the next step here, step 14, is seeing the public dashboard. By clicking on it, I will click on View Public Dashboard, and the Toolkit graphical user interface will be loaded. Let's wait for it. It takes like 3 minutes to get the result propagated. You can see on the left-hand side that we have to see something like this. We have to see a test where the source is perfSONAR2 and the destination is perfSONAR3. We have to see the throughput in both directions, and similarly for the other throughput test. I will scroll down and you can see that the results are not yet propagated. And what I'm gonna do is refreshing this screen. So we'll see. You can see that the first result, test result, is already present in the dashboard. We are seeing a throughput in one direction, which is around 2.79 gigabits per second. And we still have to wait to see the test results in the other direction and see the other participant. What I will do is refreshing again the windows, and we will be able to see the other test result. So you can see here in the test results section that we have also the throughput between perfSONAR2 and perfSONAR1. All right, with that, I will jump into the other section, and I will configure a latency and packet loss test. How do we do that? Similarly, we click on Configure Tests. We add the test by clicking on this tab. You will see that we will select the type of test that we are going to run here. In this case, we are going to use the one-way latency tool. I will provide a description. Sorry for that. Next, I will select the interface, which in this case is just one. I just want to highlight that this is not a realistic scenario, because we are configuring a latency test and a throughput test within the same interface, meaning that the test will interfere. But the aim of this lab is just showing these features, and also you are welcome to use this pod as a test bed in order, if you want to explore some features in persona that you want to implement inside your organization. So you can first consider this resource to test that feature. So similarly, after selecting the interface, I will add the test members. I will add persona 1, 182.168.1.10. We'll give a description again.
Jose, would you, sorry to interrupt you,
Yes, sir.
Ham is indicating, I don't know how I can open the window the presenter is showing. So could you show again how to, the client machine where you
Yes,
are?
yes. Let me explain that. I'm here in the lab environment. I will click on topology, and to access the client machine, there are two options. First, you can just click on the client machine, or you can also click on the tab here, which is where it says client. I will click on the client machine, and you will see that I am already there. All right, I hope that answers the question. And let's resume here. I will proceed with step number 10 and add the last participant of this test, which is persona 3, 182.168.3.10. And a description. And after that, I will add the host. I will scroll down and click on OK. And after that, I will save the test. So you can see here that we have some warnings. The first is that the throughput test will be running all the time. That because with it, you can observe here that the interval between the tests is just 1 minute. So that makes sense. And another thing is that the bandwidth test and the latency test might interfere because we are running them on the same interface. I just want to mention that, but I want to also show you something that Doug mentioned in his presentation, which is something that happens when the persona nodes are close each other. So you will see something after 3 minutes. We are just waiting for the data to get propagated into the dashboard. And what you will see is something very interesting. You will see that some results latency tests might have negative latency, which is because these latency measurements rely on the network timing protocol, which produce an unreliable latency result for nodes in close proximity. And this makes absolutely sense because persona, these nodes are designed to run measurement tests in a wide area network. And yeah, that's something that I wanted to share with you. I will click on View Public Dashboard.
So there's Ron and Brian have a comment here. They are getting error loading data when trying to view the test details link. I don't know if you had that error before. Yeah, could you comment on that?
I don't know, but we can see that together. Let me just go back to the test results section. And as I understand from the comment, they might wanted to see the details and get that error. This one. Yes, let me explain this error. This is because we just started running this test. For the purpose of this lab, we wanna just guide the user through the experience. So what you might need to do is just adjust the range. You can see here we are displaying results in a 1 week range. And maybe if you select 12 hours, you will be able to see, but not even there because we just started running the tests here. So yeah.
So basically, Jose, if I understand, this is basically, you don't have enough test points yet, but this will populate as you keep running the test.
That's correct. That's correct.
Ron, Brian, I hope that answered your comments.
So I'm going back to the public dashboard and I will click on refresh. So let's see if we can see the latency results propagated into the dashboard. Okay, here we can observe the latency results and also the losses. And you can see exactly what I was explaining, that you might see negative latency results due to the proximity of the nodes. Let me go back to the topology. This pod has 6 virtual machines, meaning that they are running practically in a local network. And yeah, this is not a realistic scenario for running regular tests with perfSONAR nodes. So to solve this issue, and I am not gonna run through the steps, but I am gonna mention it in the next section. We configure router R1 and router R2 to emulate a wide area network. We use a tool used NetTemp, network emulator, and what we do is adding delay to router R1 and router R2, so we can see more realistic results. And also you are introduced to a tool that is very useful to emulate network experiments. So with that, if there's no more question, I will end here and run into the next activity, which consists of running regular tests using the pScheduler CLI.
So you're planning to do with the same pod, is that correct?
No, I will reserve. I have already reserved it.
But can you do it with the same pod? Because I'm just guessing that I know I'm looking at the comments. Try to save resources, because if you run a new pod, you will need to get new resources.
Understood. So I will try to do that. The only issue is that we have already tests running here and they might interfere each other. So, well, I think there won't be major issues, and it will be very interesting to see that also. So I will just use this pod that is already here, but I will change the lab activity. In this case, I will run lab number 4, which is configuring regular tests using the pScheduler CLI. We deliver this lab in 2 parts, covered in lab 4 and lab 5. And the steps are pretty the same. And you just have to follow the lab. We provide a brief description about this lab activity, objectives. We describe the topology again. We give the credentials, and we provide a brief introduction about pScheduler. So we talk about the tool, and we also talk about the pScheduler command, the basic syntax, how to use these parameters, and also how to get help if you want to know more details or you want to explore another parameter available in the pScheduler command. So with that, what I will do is running a regular test using in this time the pScheduler CLI. To do that, I will go to perfSONAR 1, which is this node here. I will click on it, and you will see that I will have access to the CLI. I will log in into the interface by issuing the following credentials. The username is admin and the password is admin. So after that, in step number 2, I will run a latency test using the default tool. How do we do that? I will type pScheduler. I will specify the task, which is latency. Let's see what happens because there's another test running. The source will be 192.168.1.10, and the destination is 192.168.3.10. Okay, I will submit the task, and
Jose,
you will
I will,
observe. Yeah.
I will just pause for a second. Is there a way to download lab 4 instruction without loading the lab? That way I can reuse lab 3. I
Yes.
already have opened it.
Yes,
So
yes.
I think it's a good comment, and
I'll be happy to answer that question.
Okay.
What you can do is I will put this on the chat window. You can go to our website, click on Cyber Training, or no need to do these steps. What I will do is I will go down to the perfSONAR library, and
Yeah.
I will share this link here, which contains all
it
the
was
labs.
already shared by Edley. So,
Oh, thank you, thank you.
so there is a link that was shared perfSONAR lab series. That lab series is a PDF that has all the 10 labs together, and that include all the details.
All right. So let me access that document, the PDF. If you go here, you can see the content and just jump to lab number 3 or lab number 4 in this case. So, all right. So let's proceed and see which results we got. So you can see here, we have still having the problem of negative latency. Let me scroll up by using the following combination, which we specified here, which is shift and page up. If you are using a MacBook, the command is function shift and the upper arrow. So you can see here is where we issue the task, a latency. We are using the default tool, and you can see that the default tool is the one-way ping. And when after the test is submitted, we wait for the results, and we can see the packet statistics here. So yeah, here you can see the results. We also summarize the results here in the lab. You can see you have a full screen of this test, of the results of this test, and also you have the summary with tables and a histogram. So note also that, of course, the results might vary on each run. So in section 2.2, I will show you how to select a tool, a specific tool to run a latency test. Let me clean the screen. And what I will do is use the pScheduler command. I will invoke a task, but in this case, I will use the parameter -- tool, and I will use the tool called twping, the two-way ping tool. This is for latency. And the source is 192.168.1.10, and the destination is 192.168.3.10. So it's .2.10. All right, let's submit this task. You can see that the tool now has changed to the two-way ping tool, and we just wait for the results, and we will have something similar to to the previous test. We will have something like this, and you will have all the packet statistics using a different tool. Here we have the results. Again, you can scroll up or down using shift, page up or page down if you're using a Windows device. If you are using a MacBook, you use function shift and the arrows, up and down arrows. All right, you can see the summary of the results here. And in the next step, we are going to run again. We are going to measure the round trip time using the RTT tool, which invokes the ping tool, the ping command that we know. I will just skip this. You can see here on the left hand side that we are using the ping tool, and the results are already displayed here. Okay, so the next activity will be using pScheduler to run throughput tests. As we did with the latency test, let me clean the screen. We are gonna start using the default tool, pScheduler, task, throughput. We specify the source, which is 192. Just a pause here. If you have this issue that you need more time, you can just request it and it will add 30 minutes to your reservation. All right. The source is 192.168.1.10 and the destination is 192.168.2.10. And let's see which tool is using this test. You might guess that the default tool is, see, iPerf3. And as I was anticipating, note that we are already running a throughput test every one minute from perfSONAR 2 that we configure in lab 3, and the tests are overlapping. And the error was that there's no time available for this run. So what I'm gonna do here is just give it a try and try the test against perfSONAR 3. So let's see if this works, if the task finds a time slot to run. And it seems that it got it. Let's see the throughput because we are already running a throughput test here. But I think we had bad news because we have to wait a long time to get this task started. But the result should look like this, where you will observe the report similar to what you have on iPerf3. You will see the report of the interval every second. You will have the throughput, the retransmission, and the congestion window. And at the end, you will have a summary with the average throughput.
So Jose, would you comment why you have to have you have to wait 287 seconds, for example?
Yes,
Do you want to comment about that?
Yes. Note that in the previous lab, in lab 3, we are reusing this spot because we don't have, we might not have space. The problem is that there are already regular tests running. Let me go to the topology from perfSONAR 2. And the participants are perfSONAR 2, perfSONAR 1, and perfSONAR 3. So what we did is just manually running a test, a throughput test from perfSONAR 1, where we are here waiting 287 seconds, and it found a time slot. But we have to wait 287 seconds to see that result in displayed here. So yeah, that's the reason why this happens. And you can see before in the previous test when we ran the throughput test against perfSONAR 2, you can see that the pScheduler wasn't able to find a time slot available to run this test. Well, what I'm gonna do now is I will just show the tool. I think this is interesting for someone who wanna explore the features of perfSONAR, so they can use this spot as a testbed and the lab manuals as a documentation to explore some commands. So what I'm gonna do and finish this lab activity is running a throughput test using another tool as we did with the latency. In this case, I will use a tool called NATTCP. I will cancel this I cancel the task, and I will again schedule another task, which in this case, I will select the tool, which is not TCP. This is a throughput test where the source is 192.168.1.10 and the destination 192.168.2.10. And I will use a parameter here, -I1, so I can show the throughput in a per second basis. So I will submit the task. Hopefully we can find a time slot. So there's no time slot available for this test. Let me do the same as before. I will change the destination node to perfSONAR 3. And let's see if we have a time slot available. And there's no time slot available because the nodes are busy running regular tests. So just to summarize, what you will be seeing is that NAT/TCP also reports the throughput and other metrics. You can see on the left-hand side here in the manual an example of a test report from using NAT/TCP. You can see that you can see the command that pScheduler used to run this test, and you can see also the throughput in a per second basis. And yeah, with that, I will finish this presentation. I don't know if you have any question, or if you wanna troubleshoot, or you wanna ask me a question. I will be in breakout room number 1.
Well, thank you, Jose. And we apologize for the technical problems we're trying to fix, and hopefully I expect that the next hands-on sessions will go smoother. So we are adding capacity right now. That means more pods. Yeah, hopefully it's gonna be smoother. So Jose, I think there is a comment. I don't know if you want to address the comment or a question.
Sure, let's see. Bill says that does this argue for having less regular testing on production pScheduler servers, so there's more opportunities for ad hoc? So yeah, usually as I understand from my experience on perfSONAR, and also Doug mentioned that you don't run these regular tests every minute. You run them like 4 times during the day. And yeah, and we are doing something a bit different here, which is overlapping the test by spacing them out every 1 minute, which is not realistic. That means that you are using your network just for measurements, and that's not how perfSONAR works. But the aim of this lab is showing how this tool works, and that's the reason why we are specifying such a short interval.
Yeah, and there is also a comment from Brian. That's what I did with the perfSONAR servers. It took a while to get it set up just right, but I have got bandwidth test set up to where it only happened from midnight to 6 a.m. That's a good observation. Less busy hours. Okay. So, Doug, I don't know if you wanna, I see your comment. Do you wanna read, or do you want me to read this? Or do you wanna comment on that?
Yeah, it was a great comment about establishing test limits and how much testing you want to do. So your node can be involved in multiple different testing meshes for regular testing. And honestly, there's actually provisions in the configuration for bringing a node that you isn't actually a part of your mesh, but you want to include it in your mesh, and doing that without the node owner's express knowledge, basically. You really want to be careful with how much testing you're doing, and that you're doing it to valuable endpoints, ones that have a direct impact on the research that you're doing, network paths that you need eyes on to know the regular performance. But it doesn't take a whole lot of testing to do that. 3 to 4 times a day is more than enough. And depending on the limits that you set, maybe, again, specifically doing testing at specific times of day is even more valuable to you. Using that pScheduler plot command is really, really handy, because it's actually easier to oversubscribe a node if you've never managed one than you might think. Because all of these bandwidth tests are exclusive, they have to be time slotted. So you can use that pScheduler plot utility to take a look at just how busy your box actually is, and maybe then based on that, make some decisions about, we're doing this regular testing that we don't really need to do, so maybe we could back off of that, or maybe we don't actually need to participate in this specific mesh. So there's a variety of different tools you can use to understand just how busy your box is, but definitely try and leave some room for that ad hoc testing, because that is really valuable for network researchers and for people like myself that do a lot of performance analysis, where I need to have at least a time slot where I can get in there and do some testing off the cuff just to understand what's going on. So what I encourage people to do is be very intentional with what data is actually going to be valuable to you 6 months from now or a year from now, versus, hey, I've got a new node, I want to just see it out there testing and doing stuff, and just, think critically about what's of real value to you in a historical context when you're choosing what scheduled testing you want to do.
There are a few other.
I was going to say that, yeah, there's one more question. Is it better to do testing at the same time or vary? Interestingly enough, there's a slip rand command in your test definition. So let's say you're bandwidth testing every 6 hours. Now you're doing it 4 times a day. There's going to be a slip rand feature in there of plus and minus whatever time period you set. So if you set it for 1 hour, that means I'm going to try and schedule this at, say, 10 in the morning, but I can push that test 1 hour either way from that 10 a.m. time slot, depending on how busy the server on the other end is, or if my node happens to be busy right at that moment. And if you increase that slip rand amount to, say, 2 or 3 hours, it can push out even further if you want that to happen. So there's no real facility for saying, I'm going to test at this time on this day and this time on the next day. I mean, if you had some really complicated configurations, you could probably get away with that. But usually that randomness factor that is built into perfSONAR is enough to give you kind of a different look where it's not exactly the same time. One thing I would encourage you to do is, again, if you can look at your local data in terms of bandwidth, maybe try and schedule tests at times where you want to know what it behaves like, say, before everybody's on campus. And then what does it look like around this time in the morning when it's typically very busy? And what does performance look like maybe at this time in the afternoon when it's not quite as busy, but there's still a lot going on? What you're trying to do is generate a picture of what your network is doing at various points in the day. And so what we're testing isn't actually your maximum bandwidth. What we're testing is what you have left over. If you have a 10 gig pipe and there's 3 gigs of background traffic, you're only going to see 7 gigs. And so at different times of the day, if you have some kind of intentional tests set up to understand what your network looks like as your network is more or less busy. That can be kind of valuable in terms of, we're having problems every day at 11. And we look back historically over the last month, and we've been bandwidth testing around that time. And it looks like our 10 gig pipe is full at 11 a.m. every day because there's so much going on. It can help you start to pinpoint how much bandwidth and where that is. Any recommendations for cheap hardware for perfSONAR nodes? Yes, Raspberry Pis, the new version 4s actually have a real NIC on them. So the version 3 and lower is a USB 2.0 connected NIC, even though it looks like it's a physical NIC, it is not. So they can cope with local testing at 1 gig, but that is it. Other than that, you start adding some latency in, you get 20, 30 milliseconds away, they really start to struggle. There's just not enough there. Plus, perfSONAR node's designed to be an always on, always accessible resource, and the Raspberry Pi hardware typically struggles a little bit in what we'll call a production environment. Actually, what I really recommend if you're looking for a low-cost node is something like this guy right here, which let me turn my background filter off for a second. So this is a Intel NUC. I recommend getting the Core i3 version. There's a Celeron version of this, but the Celeron seems to have a little bit of trouble keeping up with 1 gig testing. The i3 variant, which is what I've got in my hand, this is a 8th gen one. They probably have a 10th gen out by now. It's going to cost you a little bit more to provision one of these. You're probably talking with RAM and a small SSD, maybe in the $350 range. But we've had really good luck with these holding up years and years and years of production. They're a really solid little unit. They don't have a big footprint, and at idle, they consume less power than a nightlight. So that's probably my go-to recommendation if you're looking for a low-cost node. You can put up a 10 gig capable node, though, just a very basic, say, Supermicro style pizza box server. You can get one of those up and going in the $1,500–$1,600 range. And now you actually have a server level motherboard, you have 10 gig capable hardware, and it's really not a bank breaker for most people. So there are some different options out there, but those are kind of my two go-to recommendations for relatively low cost stuff. Network testing performance throughout various campus buildings. Do PS nodes need to be installed and PCs in each location? Is there another option besides using PCs? Yeah, again, the NUC's probably your answer. For doing initial on-campus testing that you actually have more control over, you could probably get away with Raspberry Pis if you're fine with the 1 gig limit. If you want, if you're trying to get data from 20 different locations and don't want to spend a fortune doing it, that might be a good way to get your foot in the door. Again, I wouldn't leave a Raspberry Pi out there as a long-term production device. It's really not suited for that. But if you just want to get some kind of quick, interesting type of information, that might be a good way to do a 1 gig test in a pinch.
So Doug, I think we're going to need to pivot to doing the breakout rooms here at this point, but these are all really great questions.
Yes.
So Christy, if you're ready to open them up, I say we get them ready and then we give people instructions on how to get